Meeting, Board of Supervisors, County of Del Norte, State of California. We're now meeting in regular session. We're back in session at the 10 o'clock hour. It is Tuesday, July 9th, and to open the meeting, I would like us all to pause for a moment of reflection and perhaps keep in your special intentions and prayers the passing of the matriarch of the Trees of Mystery, Mary Lee Thompson. Thank you. Now I'd ask you all to rise and please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, led by the County Council, Gretchen Sturr.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Report out of any actions out of closed session, Council?
No reportable actions this morning.
Okay. And at this time, the Chair requests any deletions, corrections, or additions from board members to the agenda. In order to have an item placed on the agenda that requires action, it would have to have arisen subsequent to posting the agenda and require action prior to our next meeting. Any such items? Okay. We are going to be pulling item number 17. That will show up on hopefully our next agenda. So that will be pulled. We're going to receive brief reports from fellow supervisors regarding relative Del Norte County programs or actions, and we're going to start with Supervisor Gitlin.
Yes, thank you. Following the last board meeting, or Board of Supervisors meeting, I headed down to Sacramento to attend the annual California State Association of Counties Legislative Conference. It's there where supervisors around the state gather to learn and discuss key issues and legislative solutions proposed. One of those major issues discussed was the crumbling infrastructure, especially the poor state of California's road system. Director Will Kempton of the California Transportation Commission stated 87% of all of California roads are at some risk, and 55% are in need of rehabilitative work. The dilemma comes from the reality that gas tax revenues are decreasing, and the estimate to repair the state's highway system is estimated to be about $83 billion. Senate Bill 216 is a 5-year road repairs plan and proposes to cross a wide gamut of taxing measures to undertake these tasks. Related to that, I also met with Senator Mike McGuire to discuss the exigency of last chance grade, and Senator McGuire stated to me the critical importance of finding an alternate route around this precarious part of the 101 10 miles south of Crescent City. Last week, along with Supervisor Hemmingson, I participated in the Future Facilities Committee discussion about the placement of In God We Trust and E Pluribus Unum within the Flynn Center. The recommendation from the committee is to place both at a prominent location on the building entrance on the north wall of the Flynn Center next to Community Development Department. The board will take up the matter soon. Friday last, I attended the special meeting with the library trustees who called the meeting to discuss the sudden departure of the literacy coordinator. And immediately following that meeting, I met with several members of the Amateur Radio Club. These are the ham operators, who may very well face a dilemma on where their group will be meeting in the future. Some months back, the local chapter of our local Red Cross announced it would no longer staff an office here in Crescent City and would be serving Del Norte County from its Arcata office. The ham operators occupy space and conduct its monthly meetings in the site where the Red Cross was situated, which is on Northcrest Drive. Members of the group met with me to discuss options, including county property, if available, and if the group is compelled to move. I remain very hopeful and anticipate the situation can be worked out with the existing building, allowing the ham operators to stay in their current location. They provide a very valuable service to our community. And Take a Bite Out of Blight is in the news. The May winner of You Make a Difference, lunch for two at the chart room, is Kirk Roberts, who utilized his considerable artistic talents to remove graffiti from a mural here in Crescent City. Thank you, Kirk, for taking a bite out of blight. Work has begun by another group of artistic craftspeople who are refurbishing the iconic arrow on US Highway 101 South near Elk Valley Road. For all too many years, this rusted eyesore has been viewed by hundreds of thousands of visitors who come through Del Norte County annually. The Take a Bite Out of Blight volunteers will complete their refurbishment before the July 4th Independence Day weekend. And every Saturday at 10, Blight volunteers meet at the Battery Point Lighthouse parking lot to remove trash along Howe Drive. Come join us Saturday, 10 o'clock. You get some exercise, meet some new friends, and you'll help clean up our community. That's my report.
Supervisor Hemmingson.
Yes, thank you. I had a healthcare district 2x2 where we were looking over a resolution of support for the healthcare district and healthcare in general. Had an update from the Big Rock Water District on their water tank project. Went to the North Deal meeting in Eureka, which is Caltrans projects that they're working on. And they've got several in Del Norte County. They've got a pavement project coming up in the Klamath area on Highway 101 shortly. The Waukel Creek Bridge, where they had the culvert failure, they've got the new temporary bridge in there, and their temporary fix is 2 to 3 years. So the configuration that you've got right now, you're going to see for the next 2 to 3 years while they build a bridge in the other 2 lanes or work on getting design to build the other bridge on the other side, and then they'll move all the traffic over there, then they'll build the bridge on the other side. So I think you can expect numerous years before that's completely fixed. Last Chance Grade has sunk another 18 inches. They have a Cushing Creek paving project coming up, Dr. Fine Bridge project, which is a $50 million new bridge construction project. Is hopefully going to go to construction in 2018. The 199 project that has had an injunction put on it, waiting on a biological opinion from NOAA, is expected this month, and hopefully we'll get a decision from the courts in 2 to 3 months on that project. There are a couple of other things that we discussed. They're looking at ways to raise funds, and that may be a vehicle license fee increase. They're looking at updating LCPs, local coastal programs. They do have 15 new employees for positions in District 1. So we could end up with 3 or 4 of those, which might be a good thing. And projects that are of interest but are not in our county. The Buckhorn on 299 should be complete in 2017. The Willits Bypass is 65% complete, and it's expected to be fully complete by 2016. They're still working on trying to get the Richardson Grove fix, but that is slowly moving forward, hopefully. Supervisor Gitlin has already told you we had a future facilities meeting. Also had a Border Coast Regional Airport Authority meeting where we approved our budget. Also, the RSA project is on time and on budget. And nothing to do with county projects, but my granddaughter, I went to my granddaughter's dance recital, which was always very interesting when kids are 3 years old. And I did participate in the member golf tournament this weekend, although I didn't participate very well.
That's it. Thank you. Supervisor Howard.
Yes, following up on last week's or 2 weeks ago's important discussion specific to early childhood literacy and the work that the county board is going to hopefully be doing in cooperation with our local school district and First Five and other community partners, focusing in on education and literacy as it is important to a vaccine for poverty for our community. The school district has taken an early lead on this discussion, and the board will be following it with the Children's Bill of Rights and hopefully working with our departments to see where funds could be allocated to this important economic development tool in our community, but not only that, this early educational tool that will help us reduce, hopefully, funding in the future for our social services programs. All of it is interconnected. Talking a lot with our constituents, and would like to remind folks of our upcoming Smith River Neighborhood Watch meeting. I see our chairwoman here, Joni Forst, in the audience today, and definitely want to give a shout out to her for all the hard work she's been doing in our community to bring folks in the Smith River area together. She expressed several concerns to me recently, specific with illegal dumping in various other areas of the Smith River community, but more specifically in areas along Rowdy Creek Road and areas leading up to Low Divide. This is always going to be an ongoing concern, but it's something that we could address with the help of all our community. Also concerns, and I know Sheriff Apperson will be in attendance Wednesday at our Smith River Neighborhood Watch meeting, but with potential prostitution in the Smith River neighborhood and also drug dealing that we should be able to address and get a handle on hopefully soon. But the only way to do that is call it out and address it where it stands. And I, for one, and I know the Neighborhood Watch, for one, will never give up on that. Also, like Jerry, had a meeting with the Big Rock Water District, specifically reviewed the mitigated negative declaration for the development of their water tanks in Hyuchi. And then spent a great deal of time in preparing for what will be a long drive for Supervisor Hemmings and myself to Mammoth Lakes tonight to address the Department of Fish and Game and the closure at the mouth of Blue Creek. But it will be well worth our time because it will be a significant economic impact on our community if the board doesn't raise this to a level of concern and address the issue hopefully for next year. But hopefully we could get something done there, and I know with leadership of Chair Finnegan and some signatures that will go on a piece of paper today that we will bring with us, hopefully we'll get this risen a little to a level of concern for the commission and acting appropriately for the state resources. And then I wanted to briefly fall on my own sword. It came to my attention this morning through an article in the Triplicate that some serious investigative reporting has exposed my raw underbelly and outed my addiction to Saturday morning yard sales. Let it be known, I hope to cure myself of this sobering ailment by utilizing my constituents, you, as my own YSA, which is I call Yard Sailors Anonymous. One can only hope my family will forgive me for forcing them to resell all my Saturday morning plunders in the scorching Dilnar County sun. And I know it will be difficult to relinquish the title of Garage Father, but with your help, I know I could be cured. And as a symbol of my commitment to this new path of abstinence, I honor the man who outed me, the investigative reporter and journalistic sleuth Aaron West, with one of my ties in my collection of old ties that he could not afford to purchase at the yard sale. Thank you, Mr. West. That's all, Sheriff Finnegan.
There's never a cure, just treatment. It's one day at a time.
Aaron, did I hear you say, what's that he handed you? The tie? Oh, you didn't know what a tie was or what? You know. Okay.
All right. I, too, had a couple of meetings. I also, after last meeting, went down to State Association of Supervisors Legislative Days. I also participated as a board member in their board meeting. During legislative days, I'm not going to repeat what Supervisor Gitlin had to say about it. There was a lot of caucuses between the rural, suburban, and the urban. There was a lot of good panels. The governor spoke at a lunch. There was one panel. I sit on the transportation committee there, as well as at the National Association of Counties, where we've been working on trying to get funding for MAP 21. Transportation is recognized as the #1 issue, probably because not only the need in California, but Ricky Hokama from Hawaii, who's the National Association of Counties president this year, that was his mantra. That's where I first met him, was in the National Association of Counties Transportation. There was a lot of good discussions there. The chamber's going to make a presentation later. Maybe you want to weigh in on this. Some of us have an addiction to yard sales. Others have an addiction to whenever they see an open mic, they have to jump up and say something, and I'm not sure they're always thinking when the mic is on. Supervisor Gitlin spoke to a panel of Senator Bell, Assemblyman Frazier, Will Kempton, and complained that when we were talking about the dire condition of our roads, complained that, you know, it's those people that are coming into our community, crossing the borders, that are wrecking our roads, and couldn't we have a toll? For the rest of that meeting and during the reception, of course, I was approached by people saying, well, so Delaware County is going to start charging a toll for people to get into your county, huh? And I just laughed it off. So maybe you want to weigh in on the Chamber's position on something like that. Also attended the Board of Directors meeting, at which time we had a report from Michael Cohen from the Finance Department, as well as Diane Cummins. The state budget's $115 billion. The state says that there's a $1.2 billion in excess they get to budget for. The LAO, Legislative Analyst's Office, says there's probably closer to $3 billion. So the Senate and the Assembly are working on some things that were not put in the budget. Obviously, there's the Rainy Day Fund. They're not increasing any funding, but they're restoring some funding. They did not cut early childhood development and literacy education programs, but they did not fully restore them. They put the same amount of money that was there as last year, but not what they cut a couple of years ago. So I asked that that be brought back and talked about Prop 98. We're going to deal with that a little bit later in our agenda. We talked about transportation bills, the Senate Bill 16, not to be repetitive. And then there was there's lots of goofy legislation out there too. There's one to charge everybody that has a recorded document $75 if it has anything to do with a transaction at the title company minus residential property, and that would go towards affordable housing. And while affordable housing is something that we need funding for, perhaps is not the cure. I also then left and went to Fresno from there for a California Transportation Commission meeting. Road usage charge. I sit on that committee where we all recognize that somebody has to be paying for these roads, and we're trying to develop a pilot program, much the way Oregon did and much the way Washington did, to find a way to have the users pay for it rather than just the straight gas tax or upping the gas tax. And while there's some interim measures, as Supervisor Gitlin spoke to, that might last 5 years, there is no long-term process. And by this, I think I've mentioned it before, the people that drive Priuses or the people that drive the Teslas are not paying the same proportionate amount of gas tax because they don't use as much gas, if any gas. So we're trying to devise a program, a pilot program, where a lot of you will see that depending how you keep track of the miles traveled, you may actually get a rebate from the amount of money you're spending in taxes at the pump, which will surprise some of you. But anyway, as we go into this, we're going to probably around December, January, be looking for volunteers, and it's going to be interesting to follow. Oregon is going to put their second phase in on July of this year, so we'll track that as well. Went to agenda review, also attended the stakeholders meeting at Last Chance. We did do a tour. Supervisor Hemmingson reported somewhat on the drops. A lot of people didn't know that those walls and those fixes, more of which are going to come, is not it's basically to stabilize what's there to make sure that you can still travel, but it's not to do a fix. They recognize they cannot do a fix. You have a slip plane that's over 260 feet deep. The concern is while we have it narrowed down to 6 if you count no build, which is not an option. Focusing on those, a couple were a tunnel and a couple were going around. And the more we discuss, the more it's becoming apparent that there are some people that may have an agenda that no tree will ever be cut to realign that road, which means that they want to be the trump in saying that the road cannot be relocated. So I've asked that there already is an emergency, and that we do that exercise as if there was an emergency, begging the question that if there's an emergency and there's a catastrophic failure, what are you going to do? You're just going to go plow through there? Well, no, they're going to hold stakeholders meetings at an expedited level, but I said, okay, then let's do that practice now. And if there is an agenda where some of the environmental groups or the lawyers from EPIC have the ability to stop things, much the way they did at Richardson Grove or 199, that we get that on the table right now. Don't waste my time for another year in meetings when somebody else is going to trump the decision. Had the airport JPA meeting, we passed the budget, and I think, not to disagree with Supervisor Hemmingson, but I actually think we're under budget on the RSA, which is phenomenal. And then I participated as a spectator in the emergency drill that took place at the fairgrounds yesterday. Very amazing the way that all came together, and a lot of lessons I'm sure were learned, but we have a great community. And then took constituents calls, most of them regarding fish and wildlife, which we're going to discuss a little bit later today, and then also was able to spend some time with John Thompson down at Trees of Mystery. I'm going to be out of town at a brother's funeral, so I'm not going to be able to attend his mother's, but gave him my condolences for Mary Lee Thompson, and which really was the matriarch of one of the greatest economic drivers there's been in this community, and quite a woman. So with that, Jay, do you have CAO's report?
Yeah, over the last couple of weeks, we've been focused primarily on the budget and the requested budgets that have come in from the departments. I also attended the Healthcare 2x2, the Safe and Healthy Family Committee, and the Future Facilities Committee. Dealt with some personnel issues and have been working specifically on some recreation projects and programs, and also with the Ag Department, picked up one of the projects that they were working on, and had a number of meetings with department head, staff, and the public.
Very good. And with that, I would like to get a motion on the consent agenda, please.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to discuss item 2.
Do you want to pull it for discussion, or you just want to weigh in?
Pull it for discussion.
Can I get a motion on the consent agenda minus item 2?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Public comment on the consent agenda, items number 1 through 10 minus number 2. Back to the board. Pull a vote, please.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Finnegan?
Yes, and item number 2 was to reappoint Gretchen Sturr as the county council and approve her step increase. Supervisor Gitlin, you have a problem?
Yes, it pains me to say I cannot support the reappointment of Council Stewart for another 4-year term, and that is my opinion, and I'll let you know that.
Well, you could have done that without pulling it, but can I get a motion on that, please, to approve number 2?
I would move that we reappoint Gretchen Sturr as county council and approve her step increase.
Second that motion.
Moved and seconded. Public comment? Back to the board. Pull a vote, please.
Supervisor Gitlin?
No.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Finnegan?
Yes, and budget transfers, items number 11 and 12. Can I get a motion on those 2 budget transfers, 0601 and 0603, please?
Move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any public comment on the budget transfers? One from the Office of Emergency Services and one within the recreation budget. No public comment? Back to the board. Pull the vote, please.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Chair Finnegan?
Yes. And it looks like we're just about a minute ahead of time here. So let's do general...
Chair?
Yes.
We have Jack here from DHHS to introduce a couple new employees.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot new employees. How dare I? Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate the time. I just wanted to introduce a couple of new employees with Department of Health and Human Services Mental Health Branch. The first one is Pata Vang. Pata is a local. She grew up here and went to school, went away for a little while, and she's back, and she is one of our new therapists, or the new therapist, I should say. So we're excited to have her, and obviously she's a great resource to the community and knows this place better than me, I would dare say. So Pata, and then I also would like to introduce Angie Flores. Angie was what we call a community worker, like a peer support specialist, and part of our mission and our goal is to hire consumers and their family members into these positions, and then we were just so thrilled and happy with Angie and all the work that she does for us and for our clients that we brought her on full-time as a vocational aide. So we snatched her up because we realized she did such a great job. So I wanted to introduce my new folks.
Well, fantastic. I'm going to invite you to address the board if you'd like. Tell us a little bit about yourselves if you want. I know Jack already did, but... And I apologize, it's just because it wasn't on the agenda. It fell off, so
yeah, it's okay.
we'll make sure it's on the next time, too.
I'm Angelina Flores. I've been here about 4 years in this county. I love it. Came from Fresno, so the weather's much better here. I really appreciate this opportunity to work with the county, the public, the community. I love it here, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, my name is Pata Vang, and as Jack mentioned, I grew up here in Crescent City, and I went to school to Los Angeles, lived out there for about 6 years, and now I'm back home, and I look forward to giving back to my community. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's excellent when we have people that can come back to the community and help us be professional successes.
I'd like to just plug one more thing for you guys and for Jay. I would like to say special thanks to Kathy and Human Resources for getting all the ducks lined in a row to get everything done. She's been really great and helped me get people on board as I need them. So,
very good. Thanks very much and welcome.
Thank you.
At this time, it's 10:25. We're going to go ahead and take public comment. So the public may address the board on any item that is either on or off the agenda, but within the purview of the board, if you would, please. If it's on the agenda, you might want to wait until that time when it's brought up. But who would like to speak?
I have Joni Forrest, who signed up first.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Joni Forrest, Smith River. I've been the head of the Neighborhood Watch program now since 2010. And I have other people who are becoming more and more interested in this program, and I'm so happy about that. It's something that is vital for our community because we're on the outskirts and we don't get a lot of law enforcement out there like we really need. So first of all, I'd like to thank Roger Gitlin for his spearheading his program, for taking a bite out of blight. He came to our last meeting and explained that to us, and we are now in the process of getting volunteers together to start this program. It's badly needed out there, just as it is in all of the other communities in Del Norte County. I also want to express my gratitude to our supervisor, Chris Howard, who has been very active in our Smith River Neighborhood Watch program and our community. Thank you so much for that. We have not had this before, and you are very much appreciated. One of the issues that I follow probably more than others, I follow them all, but we do have a lot of serious things going on in Smith River. And one of the things that I follow is law enforcement, and probably that's because I am retired law enforcement. And I have the ability to communicate with people on that level. And so I constantly have communication with the Sheriff's Department about issues that we have in Smith River. And I'm hoping, beyond all hope, that coming to you today, that you, as the leaders of our community, can help us in Smith River do something about the problems we're having. We can only do so much because we are not law enforcement. I'm not law enforcement anymore, but I can help. And I'm grateful for that. But I need your help. We need your help to possibly try to get somebody out there to be there, to have a higher profile of law enforcement. I would also like to say thank you to the CHP. We have officers that come out and patrol there on a daily basis and a nightly basis, and they're writing tickets. Thank goodness for that, because there's a lot of speeders out there. At any rate, I have a lady that has come with me today who is a resident and a property owner. She and her husband, they live on the mouth of the Smith River Road. Thank you. And her name is Chris Myers, so she will be speaking to you also. But I plead with you, we need your help. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Hi, my name's Kim Meyer. I've been here a year now. We moved to a house on the mouth of the Smith. When I first saw the mouth, I was amazed by it. I'm a wildlife artist, and I have a daughter that's at 12 at Smith River School. My husband grew up in Crescent City. We moved back, and we were lucky to have 3 months with his dad before he died. And it was a big decision. And since we've moved here, I've had to phone the police 7 times. I've experienced my first school gunman shooting lockdown, where I had to pick up my daughter shaking. And it's affecting my life, it's affecting my marriage. My windows are on top of a meth house. I've repeatedly mentioned it, everybody tells me stories about it, everybody knows about it. And I'm ready to sell, and I'm here and I'm trying to stand up instead of just moaning that it needs to change. How can you can't invite people here, and I didn't research it enough, because to tell you the truth, I wouldn't have come. Because it's like it's folklore and everyone throws up their hands, and this meth is here. I can't go to the beach. I can't take the kayaks out and let my daughter stand there with the kayaks while we bring the other ones down, because I'm frightened of who's coming out of the bushes, which I've already cleaned up several times. And we need help. I phoned the police 7 times. They've come twice. One night I was home by myself. I have never seen such violence. I was home with my daughter alone. I thought it was so exciting that I moved into the place and there was no fences. I thought it was so beautiful. I thought everybody would have the same experience and the same feeling as me. And a lot of people I've met don't care. They don't care about that beautiful. I'm like, why isn't it packed with people? It is so beautiful. But I'm at a loss. I don't want to stay. I wish that I'd researched it better, that I didn't know, because my husband talks about it and his family talks about it from 40 years ago. It must have been stunning. But all I see is meth, because I'm right on top of it. And I think unless you live right on top of it, and most people don't, so it's not the first thing on the agenda. But it's everything here that ruins everything. I'm sorry about the potholes. I'm sorry about some of the other things. But you can't elevate it if there's meth everywhere. And people in the bushes drinking, and it overwhelms me. And it overwhelms me that I feel that there's no support, and that when I phone and I see my neighbor rifle butting his girlfriend of half his age, and I know that he's a prison felon that's out, nobody comes. And I'm thinking, okay, I've got 4 security cameras, I've got breaking glass alarms, I'm thinking of doing fences, because I've spent all my family's money to come here because I thought it was so stunning, and I wanted my daughter to come.
Can I ask you to wrap it up, please?
Okay. Well, it's a pretty important subject to me. I'm sorry I've gone over my 3 minutes. But if you can help.
Anybody else wish to speak? No? I'm going to bring it back to the board. What I might suggest is, if you have a meth house in close proximity, that before you leave today, you go to the Community Development Department and fill out the complaint form with Dave Mason regarding that. You have? Yes, I've done it 3 times. Okay, we'll follow up on it. Thank you very much. All right, we have a 10:30 timed item, and that is the presentation from the Chamber Visitors Bureau. Jeff? I'm going to preface your remarks. I'm sorry that your experience in Smith River has been so negative, and I hope that we can get the community support that's so needed out there. But I got to say that while there are those negative spots, it just sort of took the air out of the room. That's not the community. We have our problems, but that is not the community. And now, and I apologize for that. And now we're going to hear from what's going on with the community. Jeff?
Good morning, Supervisors. Good morning, Chair Finnegan. Thank you. It sounded like from earlier your remarks that we need a new mantra, toll roads and TOT. I wasn't aware of the comments on the toll roads, but I'm here this morning to give you a presentation on the Visitors Bureau and the Visitors Center and give you some encouraging numbers as far as visitation to our county and also the impact that those dollars bring to our community. So that's what I'm going to do right now. And our goal with the Visitors Bureau is to attract the next new visitor to Crescent City and Del Norte County. Tourism and the economy, what's not to love? They come, they spend money, and it's a clean industry. Visitation is looking up, and it's really encouraging. These are numbers at our visitor center from 2010 to 2014. And we broke the 20,000 visitor mark for the first time in 2013. And last year we had 23,410 visitors, which was an increase of 5.3% over 2013. 2013 was up 17% over 2012. And in the 5-year period from 2010 to 2014, visitation is up 33%, and if you include 2009, it's up 43%. There was a news story on KIEM TV about the Visitor Center in Arcata, and it's actually a state visitor center, and their estimated visitation last year was 17,000. Now this is just the number of people that come into the visitor center at the cultural center. This doesn't include visitors that go into the park headquarters downtown Crescent City or out in Hiuchi. You had mentioned Trees of Mystery earlier. They're expecting a record year of over 400,000 visitors. So these are just the people that come through our doors. Now these are the stats for this year through January through April. And April was up 28% over last year, and March was up 10%, February was up 30%, and January was up 23%. May is not on this graph, but May was up 10%. So the period from January to May of this year is up 18% over last year at the same time. Now sometimes people wonder what the difference is between the Visitors Bureau and the Visitors Center. The Visitors Center is operated by the Chamber of Commerce inside the Cultural Center. The Visitors Bureau is a committee of the Chamber of Commerce, and as I mentioned before, the Visitors Bureau job is to bring the next new visitor here through marketing. Once they're here, the job of the employees and volunteers at the Visitor Center is to show them all the things there are to do here and to encourage them to stay, if not 1, 2 more days, and spend their money within the community. A lot of times people aren't really aware they're here to see the redwoods, but they're not really aware of all the other attractions and hiking trails and things there are to do here. Okay, this is what we like to call the iceberg effect, and that's the benefits of tourism and how it extends beyond the surface. The tip of the iceberg is your direct spending from visitors, whether that's at a hotel, a restaurant, a gas station, or an attraction. So they come into our community, they spend their money, but then that money circulates throughout the community. So the businesses that provide services to the lodging owners, they benefit by the visitors coming into town. They also spend those wages, they give it to their employees, and those employees then circulate it throughout town. They say generally that it's a 2% conservative or 2 times conservative and a 4-time recirculation within the community. So when the people come here, they do spend their money, but then that money does get circulated throughout town. Now this is the effects of employment by visitors. Last year there were 1,315 jobs created by the tourism industry. The majority of them are in accommodations and food service. Now this number does include full and part-time jobs. And then this chart shows the total direct travel spending in Del Norte County. Now these charts are from the Dean Runyon and Associates. They are the official data collector for Visit California as well as Travel Oregon. And in 2014, $114 million were spent in Del Norte County. And that was up 2.5% from 2013. So as you can see, there is a lot of money being spent by visitors that come into our community. Now this is just the TOT tax receipts and the trend over the years. You can see that in 2007, 2008, it was over 900,000, then it dropped, and the last 2 years it has come back. Last year it was $965.7 thousand, and that was a 1% increase over the previous year. And then this chart shows total direct earnings. 2014, $38.8 million was a result of travelers coming to our area and spending it, and those are the direct earnings in our county. And that was a 3% increase over the previous year. And this chart shows visitor spending. Last year it was $108.5 million, which was a 2.8% increase over 2013. And I got curious as to how we compare to our neighboring communities and counties. Humboldt was up 2%, Curry County was up 1.7%, and Josephine County was actually down 1%. So relatively speaking, I mean, the dollar amount for Del Norte County isn't as high as Humboldt, but percentage-wise, we had a higher increase. And then this chart shows the TOT collected both in the city and in the county. And in Del Norte County, it's at $401.7 thousand. And then the total tax receipts. This includes taxes collected by the counties and the cities, includes sales tax and also fuel tax. And it is at an all-time high, and it was at $9.2 million last year. That was 4.7% higher than the previous year. So how do we go about marketing the area? One is we print these rack cards that we distribute up and down the coast from Coos Bay down to the Golden Gate Bridge, and then along the I-5 corridor from Roseburg to Ashland, and then the Reading area. And so these are distributed in the hotels and the visitor centers. We also like to do target marketing for any events that are occurring in the area. Typically, this is done in the Rogue Valley, and this particular ad was in the Grants Pass Daily Courier, and it was advertising the tall ships. This one also was in the Grants Pass Daily Courier, and it was during spring break to encourage people to come over to Crescent City. And then we just ran an ad last Thursday promoting the fireworks. We also use a lot of visitor guides. There's several publications. The Mile by Mile Guide to the Oregon Coast, published by the Oregon Coast Magazine. There's 101 Things to Do. We advertise in the Humboldt County edition, as well as the Del Norte Southern Oregon edition. We advertise in the Recreation Guide to the Rogue Valley, and then also the Go Wild guide that is distributed from Bandon down to Oric. And we also, when I see favorable fishing reports, whether it's ocean, salmon, or steelhead, we will place an ad in the Fish Sniffer magazine, and it's the largest fishing publication in the state of California. And that's my presentation. Any questions?
Questions from board members? Comments?
Oh, I just have a comment. What a ridiculous idea to charge a toll coming into Del Norte County. Now, charging a toll to get out? There's where you want to go.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Seems everybody's getting me quoted as saying certain things based on what the chairman is saying what took place.
No, this is what you said.
May I speak, please?
You sure can.
May I speak without being interrupted?
You can dig your hole deeper if you wish.
What I said, Mr. Palmer, when I was there, is that the state is looking to close an $88 billion back gap in fixing our roads. This is a huge area and everyone will be affected. What wasn't addressed is all of the people who are coming in at our portals all across the state and how they would contribute it. And what I said in the word of the toll is, should there be considered a toll from these out-of-state people who are coming in and using our roads? Now that is what I said. I had no intention of putting tolls on our local roads, so please don't be misguided by one opinion of one person. We are looking, and I want to commend you for the excellent work you've done. We are looking to address these problems to make these numbers and these growth even more dramatic, because this is spectacularly the most wonderful place in the world it can be. When I see a Ms. Meyer here who's talking about some of these issues which detract from your good efforts, yes, I am alarmed. I'm very alarmed. And I see that we have areas that are blighted and ugly, and we want to make your job easier. And yes, I'm going to continue to help you do your job, Jeff. And that is what this is all about. So thank you.
Any other board comments?
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Mr. Palmer, you know the subject is near and dear to my heart, and been greatly vested in it for the last 10 years. Presentation today was excellent. I wish there was areas you could have expanded upon. More importantly, I'd like to raise a point of interest, and hopefully you can investigate with our county tax collector. The 2012 data that was reported via Dean Runyon specific to TOT collections seems a little off, especially in relationship to the data on direct travel spending for our area. It shows a dip in 2012, which surprises me. You know, based on our reports, it seems like every other indicator throughout those years was going up except for that TOT for that specific year. And it could reflect poorly on how we collect TOT revenues here in the county, or even if those who collect TOT revenue give us their full amount of revenue. But as you know, ROI is extremely important. Into that ROI, that return on investment, that investment we use specifically from general fund dollars collected and reallocated to the Chamber of Commerce and the Visitors Bureau for marketing to that next new customer in Del Norte County is extremely important. And I think we've seen the fruits of those labors for the last 10 years. There's no question about it in my mind, especially when you look at our neighbor who's probably spending close to $2.5 million in their budget to market to that next new customer. They're also seeing that generation, and more importantly, it seems that they're getting that growth, that return on investment that's well above 6 or 7% a year. That's a great return on investment. I definitely would be willing to discuss, and hopefully in our budget process this coming year, hopefully an expansion of those funds, because I do think by investing now, we could get a greater return on investment and return to our general fund that will help address concerns like we have in Smith River, which would essentially increase patrol opportunities for our sheriff's department, or even partnering with our local rancherias to help make that happen. But without that initial investment and that opportunity for you to market, we're not going to get to that volume that Humboldt County currently has. Because we do know, based on our occupancy, if it is accurate, our occupancy is around 52% a year. So that's a lot of beds that are remaining empty that we could fill in those off-period seasons. So I encourage you to work with the board, and more importantly, work with Chair Finnegan to help us get this hopefully more into your budget for the coming year so we can get that return on investment. Thanks, Chair Finnegan.
Jeff,
Thank you.
Great report. And, you know, something, and I'm not going to enter into a debate regarding selective memory, people that are coming across our borders to wreck our roads. I actually am working on, as I explained earlier, the road usage charge that will be in conjunction with Oregon to help the people that are using the roads pay for the roads as opposed to anything else. But we have a Border Coast Regional Airport Authority that probably half the people that use the airport and pay the employment charges there that we benefit from are from Oregon. We have a Border Coast Regional Economic Development Zone that was established before Supervisor Gitlin moved into the county. In fact, we had the ceremony, I think you probably still have the pictures, when Janine was the CAO and we put a ribbon across at the border and cut it for the ceremonial that there should be no borders between our counties, that we are dependent upon each other economically and share a lot of things, whether it's transportation, tourism, etc. So there's this partnership that I hope you can expand on, maybe with coordination, cooperation, whatever, from the Chamber of Commerce, whether it's at Harris Beach or whatever, because we definitely benefit there. To the south, as I spoke with Johnny Thompson, he's up 28% already this year and looking for a banner year, as you mentioned. So there is a lot of pluses that we have to show on our community, and I love the way that the Chamber is focusing on the positive aspects of what's going on in this community and putting our best face forward rather than focusing on the negative that might steer people away from our community. So, and I think, as I have said before in past Chamber magazines, that the greatest resource that we have is our people. And whether it's the volunteers, whether it's the supervisors, whether it's the people that show up to our meetings, those are the ones that we should be championing and showing off. And I think we do a pretty darn good job of that. So thank you. And I would ask any member of the public that wishes to address us on this issue, please do so. Anybody? No? Final comments, Jeff?
No, just thank you very much for your time and your support. We do appreciate it because we take it real serious. The money that we receive from the county and the city is limited, and we know that we have to spend it wisely. So we really do take our job seriously when it comes to marketing the area. But I do appreciate your words.
Thank you very much. All righty. Let's go to item number 15, which is to approve and adopt the ordinance to amend section 7.08.440 and .460 relating to civil penalties and nuisance abatement. Heidi. Welcome.
Good morning. This is a return from our prior meeting where we introduced this ordinance amendment, which is to increase the daily civil penalty for code enforcement violations to up to $100 per day. We recommend that you approve this, as we feel that it will cause people to want to comply with the codes in a quicker manner than they presently do. So if you have any questions.
Questions, board members?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. This is something that we had a public hearing on last time. It was brought before, and this is, we're bringing it back. Any comments? Up to? Okay, back to the board. Hold the vote, please.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Chair Finnegan?
Yes. Number 16 is to direct CDD staff to partner with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife regarding the multi-year permits, Army Corps, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. Currently, we have no valid permits to breach Lake Girls, so we are going to be working on multi-year permits. In the prior 10-year period, we were partners with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and from the staff's perspective, we would like to continue that relationship. So today we're formally asking the board to authorize us to work again, partner with California Department of Fish and Wildlife on the new applications. Also putting it out there that the breach regime that we're going to be looking at is the same as what was permitted as part of the prior 10-year permits.
Good. Questions? Comments?
I'd like to share one comment and maybe a point of reflection going forward. And I know I've mentioned this to Director Kunstl. With with the water levels the way they have been in the state, there's been anecdotal information that breaching could affect well water levels within the surrounding area to Lake Earl. There's no question about it based on what I'm seeing just on our lands that there could be a relationship there. If it is at all possible to explore with the Department of Fish and Wildlife an alternative program, that would be nice in years where we have drought such as this. There's got to be a balance there, and I'm not sure what that looks like, but I would hope that we could explore that when we have this these critical times.
Great.
To second in on top of that, this is something, Heidi, as you well know, we've asked the Coastal Commission, we've asked the Army Corps, we've been asking for years to have some flexible scheduling for breaching that lake. It's interesting, the arguments that when the lake level is low, it impacts the wells. But when the lake level is high, and it might pollute the wells, of course, no, that doesn't happen. So it's, you know, which leads to that we should have some type of negotiable regime to breach the lake when necessary rather than the mandatory between this date and that date, that it's not an exact science, if you will. So, other comments? Do we have a motion on this?
Just directing staff.
Okay, we're just going to direct staff, I think. And on public comment? Okay, then by consensus, unless I hear opposition, we're going to direct staff to do so. Great job. Thank you. Number 18 is a mouthful. And that's why it didn't get on the consent, Barbara, because I figured if I had trouble reading it, people were going to have trouble understanding it. It's to approve and authorize the chair to sign several documents, intergovernmental agreements between the Department of Health and Human Services and the California Department of Health Care Services, and a lot more. Why don't you tell us what we're doing here?
This gives us an opportunity to bring new money into the county for healthcare services. It basically asks us to develop, we had to go back and look at the amount of money we spent on partnership clients at the health department. It was $438,000. We have the opportunity for the state to draw down the federal match for that. So we would send the $438,000 to the state. They would match that with federal money and send us back $1,068,000 for healthcare services. So that's new money coming into the county for healthcare services. And this is an ongoing every year activity. So this is a contract between the State Department of Healthcare Services and partnership.
So it sort of
and
expands the silo for the funding they gave us to spend for something, give it back to them, and they give us more, plus let us use it for more?
Yes.
What a great concept.
And it's great because the federal government will match it dollar for dollar.
Excellent. Questions from board members? Can I get a motion on that, please?
I would move that we approve and authorize the chair to sign all those following agreements: intergovernmental fund transfers.
As well as the First Amendment to the agreement.
All of these
partnership.
things
Perfect.
on this whole big mouthful. I could read it if you want to hear it again, but I think it's already been.
Public comment?
I'd second that motion.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Public comment, even on the concept? Back to the board. Poll the vote, please.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Finnegan?
Yes. Number 19 is to direct the County Council to prepare a letter outlining the California Department of Fish and Game, Fish and Wildlife Commission, and Department of Fish and Wildlife inconsistencies with departmental policy regarding cooperation, coordination with local agencies, as requested by myself. Some of the discussions we've been having lately, and I think you heard Supervisor Howard and Supervisor Hemmingson are going to be traveling down to Lake Mammoth, or to Mammoth Lakes, to testify again in front of the Fish and Wildlife, Fish and Game Commission regarding their actions without taking any significant input from the locals. In fact, they even flew their decision in the face of the recommendations by their staff. But we also have this issue with elk, and the elk management plan is being drafted without any input from us. When asked where that is, Jay, why don't you recap where they are with their elk management plan?
Well, they're preparing a draft, and then the draft will go to an executive committee that will review the draft, and it will then be passed on to a higher level. At such time, it may be then become public available to the public for review, but until that time, we're not going to be able to see it.
So the bottom line is they develop it without input as an agency, then they float it to a higher level within their agency, then they float it to still a higher level, and it goes through 3 iterations of drafts before the public even sees it. And while there are other plans being developed at the same time that should even be consistent with the elk management plan. Well, under the California Fish and Game Commission, miscellaneous policies, and that's why it's so hard to find, but under miscellaneous policies, one of them is cooperation, in big bold letters. It is the policy of the Fish and Game Commission that this commission, its staff, and the department shall cooperate with local, state, and federal agencies and all interested persons, groups, or organizations in every way to further the aims and purposes of the fish and game conservation, preservation, propagation, protection, management, and administration. To this end, agreements may be entered into with such agencies, groups, or persons when authorized by law. So cooperation is number 1. And then they go on to say that it is the policy of Fish and Game Commission that the preservation, protection, and restoration of fish and wildlife resources within the state is of a significant public interest and is inseparable from the need to acquire, preserve, protect, and restore fish and wildlife habitat to the highest possible level and to maintain in a state high productivity in those areas that can be most successfully used to sustain fish and wildlife, et cetera, et cetera. The key here is it goes on to say, to carry out these purposes, it is essential that a comprehensive program be implemented by the department to assure that there be close coordination with state, federal, and local planning agencies, including county boards of supervisors and other decision-making entities in the formulation and implementation of any plans, including but unlimited to county general plans, modification of plans that may affect fish and wildlife. So consultation, coordination, cooperation, mandated, spells out Board of Supervisors. They did not listen to us regarding Blue Creek. They did not cooperate. They did not consult. And furthermore, they're not doing it with the elk either. So what my request is after discussion is that we direct county council. This board has already weighed in, and our members have weighed in. But now it's time to ramp it up a little bit, I think, and send a letter on the county council's letterhead directing them that they are not following their own policies as specified. Comments? Public comments? Board comments?
As Supervisor Howard said earlier, we are going down to the Fish and Game Commission meeting tomorrow, and those points are highlighted in my presentation. So I'm going to bring that forth. If we had a stronger letter that we could give to the board also with the chair's signature on it might be helpful also. But they are not following their own policy as indicated by Chair Finnegan, and it's very disappointing to see those kinds of actions happen without going through the process that they should be going through.
Yeah, just to reflect on the points that Supervisor Finnegan and Supervisor Hemmingson have brought up, with the elk management plan, it's extremely frustrating. This has been on the table with the department since 2003. And when we spoke on this subject to the Fish and Game Commission in November last year, Director Bonham was extremely upset at staff for taking this long to develop a management plan for the elk and revisiting this issue because it's been on their plate for a long time, as you can see. Recently, last year, June 2014, the Fish and Game Commission chose to list as endangered the gray wolf in the state of California, a species that currently doesn't even exist in the state. The management plan for the gray wolf, which was directed by the commission to the U.S. or for the California Fish and Wildlife staff, was to create a management plan for that species. That management plan for a species that does not exist in the state of California will be completed before the elk management plan. It is backwards in the state, and it's up to folks like our County Board of Supervisors to make these points because these decisions do affect us small rural counties economically. And without this kind of attention, these kind of decisions will continue to affect us long term, and we will not be able to fight for our own rights here in our own backyard.
So I think this board has weighed in, and Jay, correct me, have we sent a letter to the Fish and Game Commission before?
Yes, you have.
I recall signing one. what I'm asking is that we ramp this up, that this letter now come from our county council. And rather than discussing it in closed session and threatening to sue them, let's give them an open session mandate on your letterhead, stating the impropriety, the conflict, the improprieties, you call it what you want. You got the legal definition. They're not following their own policies.
That's correct. And part of the reason that I requested that it be placed on open session is I wanted to get the feedback from the board on how strong that you want this letter to be. I mean, obviously, I can tone it down some and make it somewhat pleasant, or I can really ramp it up and drive it home. So I wanted some direction on that.
Yeah, I think that we've been
Ramp it
pleasant
up,
long
drive it
enough.
home.
Put the legalese to it, and if you can do it in time to give them a copy to be able to take with them, that would be excellent.
And what time are they leaving?
5
Shortly.
minutes. All right. Unless I hear any opposition, that is going to be the direction of the board by consensus. Consider it done. Number 20 is to review the proposed budget for Solid Waste Management Authority.
Thank you, Chair Finnegan. Fellow supervisors, I have a brief PowerPoint to explain the Solid Waste Management Authority budget.
Welcome.
Next slide, please. So the Solid Waste Management Authority is responsible for planning for all solid waste, recycling, composting, maintaining the county-owned landfill, operating the Delaware County Transfer Station as well as the transfer stations in Gasky and Klamath, using revenues from these facilities to pay for permits and other obligations related to the closed landfill, developing service standards for the trash collection franchise and administering that and the transfer station operation agreements, administering the household hazardous waste programs and collection event, public meetings, and fiscal oversight. And so that's part of what I'm talking about today. Next slide, please. So the Solid Waste Management Authority's fees are the lowest in the region for similar types of facilities, and as a result of that, our budget is continually tight. Our revenues are very closely matched to our projected expenses on a year-by-year basis. Next slide, please. So here's the budget process. At this point in time, I did come here on May 12th and reviewed the preliminary budget. Several issues were raised, specifically that we didn't have updated estimates from the Delaware County Auditor, and so I've incorporated those into the budget before you today. And I'd like to specifically appreciate the efforts of Supervisor Hemmingson, who engaged in this and made some suggestions, and the budget before you has been modified accordingly. And there will be a public hearing at the next Solid Waste Authority meeting on June 16th, where this budget or some slightly modified budget gets adopted. Next slide, please. So this is our staffing plan, our organizational chart, and I'm mostly including this to indicate that in addition to our staff, we do oversee contracts with Hambro Waste Solutions Group and Recology Del Norte. Next slide, please. I mention that because most of the solid waste revenues that are used for solid waste services in the county are going to Recology, then to Hambro, and then the Solid Waste Authority represents approximately 14% of those dollars. Next slide, please. So for the Solid Waste Authority revenue, most of that comes from transfer station fees, 8% comes from franchise fees, and a small portion comes from grants. Next slide. So in terms of our expenses, most of the Solid Waste Authority budget goes to pay Hambro Waste Solutions Group for operations of the transfer station. And then we have other expenses listed there. Next.
The personnel, is that outside of the transfer station?
No, that includes the
500 some odd thousand?
The $531,000 includes all Solid Waste Authority personnel. It does not include the personnel of Hambro Waste Solutions Group.
Okay, so that isn't the transfer station operations.
It's not operations, but it is gate staff. Gate staff and accounting staff.
Okay, so how much is transfer station operations really costing us?
$1.84 million
plus
annual. And it depends upon exactly how much comes in. They get paid based on their service fees.
Plus personnel.
That personnel is all just the gate staff, the staff that's scaled people.
Okay. So the recommendation is to either comment or approve the budget or take no action, and that would be equivalent to approval. If the Board of Supervisors has any specific comments, we can most effectively address those if the board appoints a representative to attend the June 16th authority meeting. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Any? Supervisor Gitlin.
Ted, if you, just an explanation on some of the, I'm on the 9,000 series. You can, so I'm looking at gate 91003, gate tipping fees.
Yes.
3.8% gate service increase, is that correct? That's about what it's coming down to, 1734. It's a difference of $66,000.
That was actually pointed out, and that was part of what Supervisor Hemmingson helped us to identify, is there is always a slight difference between the fees that are raised and the amount that we pay to Hambro, and part of that is that the authority essentially covers some of the expenses. So for instance, when the road department picks up trash along the side of the road that's been dumped in the roadway, then the authority will cover those expenses, and so the amounts that we pay Hambros actually exceed the amount that we have.
So the amounts you're looking at paying Hambro is $1,780,000, is that correct? That's item number 20239, transfer station operations.
202, that's correct.
Okay, so that's only a 0.3% increase in their revenues. So I'm asking the question, the difference is between 3.8%, and then I'm going right down to the next line, the authority service fees, that's up only 1.4%. I'm trying to make sense of the math here.
Right, and what had happened was that as I was adjusting for the increases in the expenses detailed by the county auditor, I increased the 9,000 series, but unfortunately I did not make a matching increase to the 2039. So
okay,
that.
So, and again, I'm not trying to be picky on this thing. We've gone around this thing a couple of times, Ted. We're trying to get this thing right. Now, this is an error then. You're saying this is going to be corrected?
I'm saying it has been corrected, and what is presented before you under column A is ready for approval.
Okay. Now I'm even more confused. Are you saying to me that transfer station operations only reflect the 0.3% increase, yet your tipping fees are going to go up 3.8%?
No, I'm not saying that.
Because that's what I'm gleaning from these figures which were provided to me by you.
Right. And so the one way that you could probably look at this most accurately would be to look at the proposed budget in column A compared to the approved budget in column E. And there is a column there for looking at the increase versus decrease of A minus E. So that's an accurate reflection of the change in the budget from last fiscal year to this coming fiscal year.
I actually don't have a problem with the $66,000 figure increase. That seems a reasonable number. I'm just trying to figure out the math here and trying to figure out how you are projecting 3.8% and how much of it is actually going to pick up road waste. You have not indicated this here. What is the actual cost of picking up road waste that is the difference between the tipping fees and the amount?
There's a difference of approximately $40,000.
How much?
There's a difference of approximately $40,000.
Okay. And as far as the franchise fees are concerned, what's your justification for a 3.3% increase?
That was based on projections from this fiscal year, looking at how the revenues were coming in on the franchise fees. I updated the projections for franchise fees. You'll also notice that I slightly updated the projections for authority revenue 91004. That went down slightly.
91004 authority fees, 959 to 998. That's about $39,000 difference, and that represents a 1.4% increase. That's what I'm seeing. So I was trying to figure out how the 91004 is 1.4% and the gate tipping fees are 3.8%, and I'm still not sure I have an answer to that.
I'd be happy to meet with you to look at those numbers.
You know, we will. I sit on the board, and I will be happy to meet with. Of course I'm going to meet with you. I just would like to make some sense out of this report, and it's getting very difficult. We've been around this three times now, and I just would like to read something that makes sense in my little cerebrum. So, okay. you've tried to explain it to you. I'm not satisfied with it, but then let's move on, and I'll talk to you separately, and you can show it to me in black and white in your office.
Ted, the only question that I got is over payroll and personnel, trying to get that straight in my brain. Who is incorporated in the 303,262 for payroll? And that's excluding overtime, part-time, retirement, benefits, all that sort of stuff.
That's correct.
That's just payroll.
So the payroll...
How many people? I'm sorry. How many people is that, and who is that?
How many people does it include?
Yeah.
It includes our gate staff as well as what changed was the previous personnel estimates included my role as acting director and program manager, plus a director. At the last meeting, the board gave direction to begin negotiations to have me director, and so the personnel expenses changed accordingly. We have one director, and then the other position becomes the program manager, but even under the best of projections, we won't be able to hire that person until the 1st of September. And so the personnel expenses included 10 months out of 12 for the program manager position, and one director as opposed to two. So that's what changed in the payroll line.
Well, it still went up, and I was somewhat significantly, but that didn't really answer my question. Out of the 303,000 people, how many people are we paying for? As opposed to the 531,000 on your personnel projected expenses.
That includes our current staff of 10 plus one more. But the staff of 10 includes several people who are part-time and temporary, and so I don't anticipate we'll continue with that number.
Well, part-time temporary is broken out separately, so I'm going to ask you again on the payroll. That's full-time people, excluding their benefits, budgeted in 110 line item.
There are
we got there.
There are 4 full-time people. Gate staff officially are not full-time.
Okay, so that's for 4 full-time people. And you're looking to add one more that's not included in that?
That would include the 4 includes the program manager.
Okay. And this is an aside, but are you going to float that job out?
Oh, absolutely. We plan on doing a recruitment for that.
Then why didn't we do a recruitment for the head guy?
That was the board's decision based.
Okay. This is the budget. I know that was a poor decision. And since the door is open for me to weigh in on that right now, I'm really concerned that we would do a recruitment for second, but we wouldn't do a recruitment for first. And I'm not saying that you aren't qualified, because you were doing the job for 18 months or something. But come on, that's a high-paying job that should have been floated so it looked like it was transparent. So anyway, any other questions from the public on the budget? Back to the board. What's the direction?
Yeah, I just want to weigh in. So I have worked with Ted here quite a little bit on the budget, as well as Mr. Taylor, to try to get it sort of close. And I'm happy enough, or not happy, but content enough with the budget that not that I think we need to vote for approval. Doing nothing does the same thing. They do have some financial issues. But that doesn't have anything to do with this particular budget at the time. I don't think they can afford more staff. I don't think they can afford to do the repairs that they need to do, as well as keep up with depreciation at the level that they're doing it. They need to make some changes, and hopefully somebody will see that.
Thank you, Mr. Hemmingson, for bringing that up. As we discussed during the first presentation, we are still planning on doing a repair to the transfer station floor, and that expense will likely hover between $180,000 and $200,000. And so we anticipate by the time this fiscal year is done, we will end up in a deficit budget. But that is planned because it's an important maintenance expense that's appropriate for the transfer station.
Okay, thank you. And unless I hear differently, I guess the way this plays out is we just take no action, and I guess that's by consensus. Thanks for the.
Well, actually, I do have an objection. So taking no action means this thing moves forward as if we give an approval. So I'm objecting to this. I think we need to get this budget right. I think we need to do it instead of coming back. So no, I'm not going to vote. I'm going to take action by saying that this budget is not right, and with as many times as we had and going around on this, we need to get the thing right. I need to understand how you're coming up with these numbers.
So there's a motion by Supervisor Gitlin to reject this budget. Is there a second? There is no second, so that action dies.
You know, and this falls on the Solid Waste Authority's board with its complacency, I guess, in not taking any kind of action with this budget and the way finances are going. And it's very disappointing to see this go. And the public is are the ones that should be weighing in on this. And it's really disappointing as far as a board member sitting here and watching this kind of thing happen.
Yeah, briefly, Chair Finnegan, if I could reflect on that, I agree with Supervisor Hemmingson. There's got to be a higher level of transparency within the Solid Waste Authority going forward. Measurements and accountability are terms that we utilize frequently, and especially government funding operations such as this JPA. My thoughts are simply this, Ted. You've got a big job ahead of you, and we could all appreciate the work you've done in the past, but I hope you could take this to a new level with the JPA and work with your current board and hopefully get them engaged in the process. So when we see budgets such as these and have a great deal of concern with them, that we don't have to be coming back on you. We could come back on your board and say, hey, let's get it right this time.
And also, I just want to chime in with what Chair Finnegan said about not flying the position of director is extremely disappointing. That you don't feel confident enough or transparent enough to fly that position. That's a real disappointment to me also. I've never seen, matter of fact, I don't think we've ever seen that happen at the board level, at this board level, where we have not flown a position, even though we might hire within, and I would expect that they probably would have hired within, but not to fly that position is totally unacceptable, and I think the public should be outraged.
Supervisor Hemmingson, I just want to comment because you've been referring to the Solid Waste Board as we made this decision. I want to be very clear, and you know this, of course, Supervisor Hemmingson. I've been a resounding no to this, and I'm absolutely flabbergasted that we've gone this route without completely ignoring the R3 report at a cost of $33,000, and we've just gone willy-nilly ahead and appointed a director without flying the position. I'm astounded by it, and I was as loud as I could be, a resounding no vote. Needless to say, we live in a democracy, and the vote was 4-1. And I'm going to tell you, Ted, I'm going to be watching this much more closely than I had before, even though I've tried to watch this thing as closely as I can. These numbers need to match up. We've had theft before. We've had too many problems associated with this agency before. I'm not going to turn the other shoulder and the other eye on this. This is the public's money. So you don't have my support on this budget. My vote is no on taking action. So whatever the other supervisors do is that. And as far as the Solid Waste Board is concerned, I am going to ask that it be reviewed at the R3 to merge these two positions, the director and the program director, into one and save some money. And not willy-nilly go forward into hiring someone else to either put you further into a deficit. So having said that, I hope you will hear my words.
Public comment want to weigh in?
This is Steve Perez. As the former business manager at Pelican Bay State Prison, this budget is nothing. $240 million is what I exercised oversight over. The process that you have here, and forgive me, I'm just, not once did a single warden at Pelican Bay ever go testify about expenditures, new programs, at a hearing, fiscal hearing. We had people who were trained experts who had that responsibility and were held accountable apart from the warden. You talk about public trust here and public money. Well, I don't see the Solid Waste Management Authority Board really doing anything in terms of putting in a qualified person to manage the budget. You need a budget director apart from an operations director. Now, state government really reflects that quite well. You have the warden, you have a chief deputy, and you have a correctional administrative business services who is supported by a college-educated, college-degreed accountant. And they work together to formulate the budget. I don't see this here. I don't see that the methodology that's here, for instance, there should be an explanation for every line item here. For every line item here. I mean, just the magnitude of what I see here in account numbers tells me that this thing is like almost way out of control for one person. But if you don't know exactly what each line item represents and what the expenditures are there and the justifications for it, you get to the questions where you're at. Exactly where you're at. But you can't expect one person who has overall operational management to manage this. It's not going to work for you. You're going to be frustrated, frustrated, and frustrated. You got a second position. I would encourage you to work with the Solid Waste Board Authority to make sure that that second position comes in with a person who has strong budgeting and accounting skills.
That's what the director was supposed to have. That's part of the job description, although they didn't go with that. And this is about as simple a budget as you could possibly come up with. This is not rocket science here. This is a very small and easily readable budget. There is no rocket science here. This is...
But you know what the problem is? We've been hearing this budget in the public for how many years now?
Pastor, can I respond to what you just said there? You're absolutely right. It was the intention with the R3 report, which I presume you have some knowledge on, is to hire someone who has this kind of experience, just like you were talking about. We don't have that. No disrespect to Mr. Ward. This is not his thing, and that's why we're struggling with it. We don't have a professional financial person on board, and now we're talking about looking at program director. So this is a ship without a rudder, and I am concerned. We need to reevaluate this and get us a financial person, just like you say at the state level, who knows how to answer every question so that someone like me can understand it, and I do not. And I'm going over this thing tediously. So your point is well taken. The Solid Waste Board elected to move ahead with my dissenting vote on a 4-to-1 vote to hire Mr. Ward, and that is history. There's no review by the Board of Supervisors or the City Council, unlike you have with the public member who has to go through a process of review and confirmation. We don't have that with the director. So this is the situation. And Mr. Ward is going to be tasked with doing a lot of work that he is not familiar with, and I'm wondering how this is going to play out in the system. So your point is well taken, sir. I hear you very clearly.
Okay, any other public comment? I'm going to close the public comment, bring it back here to the board. I think we're getting a little off task, but this is the frustration. It's been my frustration for years. I know it's been other people's frustration for years. This is a JPA, and while we appoint members to it, they're the ones that have oversight. They're the ones that have the decisions over the budget, over personnel, and that's what's been frustrating is don't come here and ask me to say something about personnel or budget when I don't have a vote in that, nor should I have a vote in that unless I'm on that committee. I mean, at one time, that's why you had the advocates for bring it back in-house, where you got, a department, you got staff, you got fiscal oversight, but for this purpose here, board doesn't need to weigh in because we have no authority. Anything else? A little bit.
I just wanted to assure the supervisors that we take the fiscal oversight responsibilities of this agency very seriously. And while this is not part of the budgeting process, we've had 6 surprise cash counts where the county auditor came in with the authority treasurer and made sure that our accounts were accurate. And each one of those cash counts came down to the penny. So you can be assured that we are taking our fiscal management responsibilities very seriously, and this is a plan for the future year, but as all plans change, as things evolve, I anticipate that our actual final budget will be, after that fiscal year is over, will be different from what we present today because things change as the years evolve. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. And I would urge Supervisor Gitlin, who still has some questions, to take those up with his solid waste board in that forum and hopefully can get some answers. That's going to take us to item number 21. Approve the chair to sign a letter opposing Assembly Bill 45, which places program and financial responsibilities on local governments, requiring jurisdictional approval for residential collection. Jay, do you want to tell us what this is about? I think I mentioned.
This was actually brought forward by Mr. Ward.
Okay, increase. So this is regarding the 15% household
Yes.
waste.
The Solid Waste Management Authority Board voted to send letters of opposition to AB 45. AB 45 essentially requires each jurisdiction in the state to come up with a baseline of the amount of household hazardous waste that's being recovered and to increase that by 15% with all of the responsibilities falling to the local agencies. The Solid Waste Authority has pioneered producer responsibility programs for mercury thermostats, for carpeting, for architectural coatings, and these programs work by charging a little bit extra at the purchase counter and then setting monies aside for end-of-life management. We think this is a better approach in general for managing household hazardous waste, and this bill, if it were to be adopted, it's now become a 2-year bill, would almost certainly increase rates for solid waste and hazardous waste management throughout the state.
Well, not only that, but as I understand it, while you do have a JPA and you are the local authority, there is some question as to whether the reference really is to boards of supervisors, to county jurisdiction and city jurisdiction. So the indemnification is not there like we would have thought when the JPA was formed. Another reason for us to oppose.
And I just have a couple of questions. And one is, what's the downside of this bill? I kind of think that it's kind of okay. And the other thing is who gets the money?
The main downside is that it requires a dramatic increase in the recovery of household hazardous waste without having a funding source. And so in order to do that, currently, for example, to have our one-day collection event, that's from 9 a.m. till 2 p.m., 1 day a year, costs approximately $30,000. And so to increase expenses to cover 15% more, we could expect those costs to increase quite a bit. And unfortunately, there would be very little feedback to the people who are actually purchasing those products. And there are less toxic alternatives that don't necessarily have to be managed as hazardous waste.
Okay, so I'm reading this wrong then. I'm thinking that you were going to increase the fees by 15%, but you're increasing the collection. Is there a fee associated with increasing the collection then?
There was provision in this AB 45 so that if revenues were short, to increase that collection by 15%, then the local agencies could raise their fees accordingly. And like I said, I can assure you that most jurisdictions across the state would need to do so.
Which also gets into that local agency, quote unquote. It's not just Solid Waste Management Authority, it's the county and the city that would be on the hook. Okay. Can I get a motion regarding approval and authorization of the chair to sign a letter of opposition for AB 45? Okay. If you are willing to accept another level of unfunded mandates and repercussions should solid waste not fulfill it, we will let this one go for now. That is too bad. You going to be sending a letter?
We have already sent one, and the city is in the process of sending one.
Okay. We'll stand alone. Number 22, consider miscellaneous legislative budget matters pertinent to the County of Del Norte.
Well, there are a lot of legislative and budget matters out there, but legislatively, I've got about 7 pages of different bills that we're reviewing. We're about midway through the process right now. I received 5 more pages yesterday, and I'm going to review all of those because some of those have effects. Our advocates are also involved in reviewing and making suggestions based on our ledge platform, but suffice to say there's a lot of language out there, some of it that will never see the light of day and others that we're going to have to stay on top of, and we will bring those forward for letters as appropriate. But we've got everything from coastal issues and CEQA issues to retail food issues that are coming forward in regards to some of the legislation. And yesterday I was reviewing a couple of bills that would affect our Ag Commission and how fees are charged over there. So I will be bringing forward any of the requests for support or opposition probably within the next few meetings as they come forward and if they leave committees. Right now, many of these are in committee.
Okay. Any questions, comments, any other legislation you're aware of? Okay. Takes us to item number 23, regarding a support letter written by First Five California, Early Edge, and a statewide coalition of early education advocates, asking the governor to increase funding for specific issues to support young children as requested by myself. This was brought forth through First Five. It's also supported by United Way 0 to 3. The list is in front of you: Bay Area Council, First Five LA, First Five California. It is pertinent because of the excess revenues that are being realized in the budget, not to specifically ask for an increase, but just for full restoration of that was taken away, whether it is early literacy, whether it is for early childhood education, equal access for low-income children, continue to focus on increasing the quality in all early learning settings, and increase the rates of the cost of living adjustment so low-income families can afford a wide range of these programs. It's consistent with everything we've done here, and it is on the horizon, and I ask that we weigh in early with support as the legislation gets developed.
And I would move that we write a support letter. Or
And
weigh in, or whatever you want.
Okay.
Support their letter, however you want to do it.
Can I get a second?
Chair Finnegan, second.
Okay, go ahead.
For discussion. Chair Finnegan, I'd like you to hopefully explain to me, or have somebody explain to me, the linkage to Prop 98, because there's some language in Prop 98 specific to Test 3 when there's a down economy, how that affects funding for those programs. And I specifically refer to, when there's down economies, that the funding shortfalls shift to property tax, specifically from counties. I'm wondering, I know this is an up year when we have great amount of economic growth. How would that affect us in coming years? Let's say we have another recession, downturn in the economy. Under Prop 98, it specifically says in Test 3 they look towards county property taxes for that revenue generation to support the program. That's my concern. Is, do you have any knowledge of that?
Not specifically, but we could certainly get it by the next meeting. Prop 98 is, correct me if I'm wrong, the backfill when the school funding falls below a certain level.
Correct.
Then the state takes the money from county property taxes if need be.
Yeah, it's a minimum guarantee.
Right. So I think that's the relationship right there. Is the schools have a fantastic union and a fantastic association that lobbied for guaranteed funding for their programs, and that being one of their funding programs, that would be the method for funding. That would be through the Prop 98 allocation. You're correct, we don't need to worry about that now, but in downturn years, when the minimum allocation funding for schools is not there, then it's going to come at our expense, I believe. Well, the state's expense. They'll rearrange it. This, I think the direction we're going in right now is why you got a $3 billion budget surplus. It's not to start a new program that you can't sustain. It's recognizing the economic benefit and the absolute necessity of these programs for the future success of our children, our education systems, and our economies, and asking them to reinvest those dollars that they had taken away at a bare minimum. And that's the conversation that's happening. The Senate and the Assembly is behind that, and you're going to see a lot of legislation along that lines. For right now, the governor would rather focus on the K through 12 education process rather than the early childhood education. Public comment?
Can I weigh in before you go to public comment, sir? Chair, I'm a little concerned about this letter. There is a letter, and I'm holding it now, a letter of support. Now, what is the board action? Is support this letter? Is this simple action? Because we're not, it's by itself sending another letter. Is that the understanding? We just support this First Five letter? Is that what the intent is here, Chair?
The intent would be for this board to weigh in to say that we support those principles in that letter, absolutely.
Well, my questions have to do with this surplus funding that you referred to is evaporating as we speak. There's probably not going to be anything left. The budget has to be in by Monday, the 15th has to be submitted. I'm just wondering what the purpose is and where are we going to find $600 million? That's what this calls for. We got roads to fix and everything. I just cannot support this kind of spending without having some justification. I support the program, but we have to look at it, and we have to look at it and say, what can we do with what we have? Otherwise, there are going to be more taxes. $600 million is not a throw in the basket. Where's it coming from? It's going to come ultimately from Prop 98, which by a 2/3 majority would come from your property taxes. I have it right here.
No, that I'm not. That's not the formula. All right, public comment. Back to the board. There's a motion to support the principles of early childhood education and development and reinforce it with a letter as needed.
I'd make that motion.
It's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
So let the record show that it is a 3-to-1 vote with Supervisor Gitlin opposing. And with that, you know what? We're done.
Could I have 1 minute? Chair, could I have
Yes.
1 minute on the, just to update on the budget process?
Sure.
Essentially, right now, we are in a position of bringing forward the requested budget in a recommended form. That budget will be in deficit until such time as we can see what the final state budget looks like, as well as what the year end looks like for the county sometime in August. That'll be brought forward to you in the next meeting. We're continuing to have meetings with different departments that are the furthest out to try to whittle that number down until we get to the final push, which will happen over the next 2 months. So I want to make sure that everybody's aware of that, and fairly typical process of dealing with finances at the end of the year when you are a county that doesn't have a surplus of revenue sitting in their coffers.
Exactly. All right, before we leave this, I just want to reiterate, which I will every time, is it's just not a matter of throwing money at something that you don't have. It's when you are investing in something, as we do with early childhood development and education, there is a 7% per annum per year return on that investment. It is an investment we cannot afford not to make or support. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.